we're going to go ahead and get started with this panel. This is a new discussion that I submitted to MAGFest after my experience with New York Comic Con, which has newly been converted to the idea of having video gaming as a part of their, offerings of nerd space enjoyment, right? And we had this discussion about what is gaming community, especially in relation to, things like esports, what is happening now with Web3 and everyone trying to integrate crypto and NFTs and, the blockchain into our gaming experiences, the Second Life aspect, people who live vicariously through their characters, and that is how they socialize with people that they've never met. No. And we have this dynamic that is happening where people have a one-on-one relationship with the world in their physical bodies as we walk around every day like most of us do. And then we have another relationship with the world that goes through the gaming space. And we try to superimpose morality and geniality and connectivity and all of this into this online society, but it's not as easy to do as we might think because our connections are different online versus the way we connect when we're sitting right next to each other in a row. And it's very clear that people like each other, right? Because they are sitting right next to each other when there's clearly like, no. It's like, you were great. You were right the first time. The old man law of like, if we go to the movies, you got to have a seat between us. We're not on a date, but you might be, right? So we have these rules that we are starting to move that in the gaming space and in the gaming community it's being built around it. We're trying to find ways to be kinder. We're trying to find ways to parlay our connections that we make online into real life benefit and connection. And that stuff is not happening automatically. So for MAGFest, which I think stands alone as, conventions, air quotes, because I know MAGFest doesn't like to call themselves that, of a space where people who are in the gaming world are connecting face to face, how many of these spaces are replicated anywhere else in our day-to-day lives as gamers and people who enjoy interacting. Now, on this panel for this discussion is Montel Thompson. He works at Atlantis Games over in Virginia Beach, the Tidewater area, and he is a connoisseur of the RPG, tabletop, board game, Dungeons and Dragons, card games. I mean, the list can and does go on. But you also are a pretty avid video game player, as we sort of stopped you from playing a game like 2 seconds ago. He was about to start one while we were waiting.
I just needed something to kill the time, that's all.
You see, and our relationship to gaming is constantly evolving because I come from a generation where you had to turn your TV to channel 3 and then turn on the Atari or the Sega and then play, and sequester the TV, and the whole house had to be in agreement 4, that you're going to play. Well, that was a Magnavox. I was on Zenith. So, did I just age us? Sorry.
Yeah.
It's like people under 30 are just like, what is he talking about? It's like,
Color TVs were on the floor. Okay.
Made of wood, a planter with some, nice gedalias coming out the side.
Grandma's cut candy dish and the planter. Yes.
Maybe a viewing of a recently passed relative, sitting in the wood, for people to come by. This is a multi-purpose thing that we have. I actually have one of these in my house, and it's funny when you see it. But anyway, that's another story. Over here on my far left is Javon Gard. He is someone who is, when I say scholastically, scholarly, researched in the game space. And everything about video game, from music to writing to, even the industry that produces the games and the ethics or lack thereof of these.
Wow.
No, I'm telling you, he's got a gear. Everybody, that sees 5 gears, he's got a 6th gear. Where we have to turn the camera off and everybody has to sign an NDA, and he will light this whole place up. I've seen him do it. He's done it here. He's done it for MAGFest, and it's why we love him. So if you guys could preemptively give a round of applause to our panelists who have decided to join us despite me. Despite me and my
bucket hat for you. How dare you?
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to start with a video of a an experiment that is emerging in cities and regions around the country of game houses. Anyone familiar with the concept of a game house? So I had never been to one before, and there's one approximately 2.5 blocks from the Javits Center that we were able to do some activations as BlurredCon, the Black Nerd Convention, which, by the way, I run. Hi, forgot to introduce myself, sorry. And we did a set of activations at this place called Coexist Gaming, right on 38th Street, and it is an entire gaming space. It has everything from tabletop gaming to card games, and I mean from Yu-Gi-Oh to Uno, Jenga the size of a small little brother or cousin, you know, that like if they fall, it could actually hurt someone. It's like a really amazing thing. They've got bars, it's a full course restaurant. Everything is in this space, and they are taking this gaming community out of their homes in Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens, and they come to this space similar to what you might see with a WeWork, and it's a subscription-based space that you can come anytime you want and play games and do tournaments and all this stuff. And I wanted to show this to you and then kind of proctor the discussion from there. So let's make sure we have sound, and we will see how this works. Go ahead.
It's the grand opening for Coexist Game. There's a commercial spot right here on 38th Street between 9th and 8th. It is lit.
The energy in here is amazing. Like you're walking in a completely different world.
It's like a gaming club in New York where people can come, content creators and music people, and just connect. It's really dope.
There's a whole party going on. Oh man, if you're a gamer, you would definitely love this place.
There's like all these classic games that you can play.
They have over 2,000 games, like from a Neo Geo, Super Nintendo.
On the first floor, there's a bunch of arcade games. In the back, we have the Citadel. People are chilling in the lounge. Upstairs, we have tournaments, NBA 2K22.
They have a bottom floor was like a lounge. They got ping pong downstairs. They have the big Uno cards.
People performing and stuff like that.
They have a studio. Like I'm into music, so that was super dope for me.
Coexist is a place where creatives come together. It's games, it's music, it's art. It's a lot of creatives coming in one space, really enjoying the company of people who they would have never met outside of a space like this.
People who will never coexist outside can step in these doors and meet a whole nother branch of friends that they probably would not have connected with outside. I'm the type of person that I see you walking on the street, and in my head, I want to be your friend, but I'm like, we're in New York, we don't do that. And Coexist, you can do that.
You meet people and they have that same energy, and it just builds as a collective.
I think this is a good spot for anybody who's not even a gamer, because you can chill, you can drink, you can vibe, network.
Everyone has a space here at Coexist Gaming.
Even if you don't play games, there's still like a chance to connect with people.
I've met 2 girls here, and I'm like, oh, how long have you guys known each other? And they're like, we just met here. And now we're a group of people hanging out, and I'm sure at some point we'll collab on music. This is the place for that kind of energy to consistently be that way. I've never felt anything like this before.
It's all love here. I feel like everyone's trying to meet people for genuine like connections.
We're gonna vibe and we're gonna talk, and Coexist lets it all come together in one spot.
So I wanted you guys to see that, because when I tried to describe Coexist for the people who had not been there yet, for the activations we were doing, just people's faces just turned upside down. They had no idea what I was trying to describe. And luckily they did a really, really good commercial there that would allow you to kind of see those spaces. And one of the things that I was thinking about, and I'd like you guys to chime in on this, is that what you see there are gamers who are working together, collaborating, creating bonds of friendship and cordiality, and it seemed from everyone you saw, it felt like a safe space. I've been there. It feels like a really safe space in a big city with a lot of noise that for a lot of us who may not be from a big city could be intimidated by. It's like this zone where everything is just buffered and the outside world stays out. And the gaming community that comes in, they're playing against one another or with one another in a lot of the same ways that you guys do when you're online playing games. But then when you're playing online, there's this viciousness if you're a woman, right? Or there's this, racism if you're a person of color. Or even ageism, or just anything about you that might seem different or vulnerable is open to attack. And it seems to be a knee-jerk reaction in the virtual space that our gaming technology allows us, and most of us who don't have one of these in our city, to be subjected to. But then when we combine ourselves in a space like this at MAGFest, or we go to a space that's, a permanent, round-the-clock space like Coexist, we have manners, and we want to connect, and we want to be friendly, and all of these sorts of things. So my question is, how can we replicate some of the dynamics and environment that is obviously working really well in this physical space amongst people who game in the virtual world, where there is not so much of this connection and cordiality? Like, are we even heading in that direction? Is it even possible? I'll start with you, Javon.
I knew you would. You want my good answer or you want my honest answer?
Give me your honest one, then your good one.
Okay, my honest answer. This is a hard thing. It's not impossible. What makes it hard is because people come in with their own inherent biases about who they want in and out of the space, right? How we define what a gamer is already contentious, right? So some people will say it's safer to nickname themselves as like being a player, which is fine, right? But there's always going to be folks who want to gatekeep for various reasons, right? Now, you asked a good question. How do you replicate something like this, maybe in another venue? And so there is the structural part of that question, which is, yes, we can have a building, we can have TVs, we can have spaces, we can get people, we can get black people, right? Right? All that stuff, right, can be there and can still fail, right? What you cannot replicate is the investment, right? And we're not talking financial, right? That's in some ways easy, right? What we're talking about is an investment from the community investing into it, right? Because if the community cannot be fostered and grow and feel safe to flourish, there is no business. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So how you replicate something like this is, well, first you have to find out if the community even wants something like this to begin with, right? It's like building a new condominium in Southeast DC. Am I saying too much? Am I saying too much? Right?
Some real estate brokers in here scratching their neck.
Right? Does the community even want something like this? Is it even built for the community in mind, right? What are some of the local artists, right? Both as like game developers, right? As people who are musicians in the space, local talent that can feed into the existing infrastructure, right? Anyone can slap up a building, put 4 walls to it, and call it like Coexist Part 2, DC, whatever, right? But it will mean nothing if the community does not feel a part of the process. So how you replicate something like this is infrastructurally, that's the easy part, right? But community building, that's the real work that needs to be brokered first.
See, that is a really fascinating take, because the idea that it has to start with the community buy-in, right? It's the chicken and the egg argument. Like, if we create a space where people can go in and literally coexist, will we, be on our best behavior? Will we show our best selves and share our best selves with one another, if that's not something that's already inherent in the community that exists outside of the building before they build it, right? And so that is definitely your real and honest answer, and it's not cheerful at all. I would love a world where if we build the right wallpaper and the right music and everything, we can kind of bring out of folks their best selves. But if it's not already inherent in the people in the building, and I guess for those of you who have been coming to MAGFest for years, can say definitively that applies to MAGFest. MAGFest has been in different buildings. It has been in different states. It happens in different parts of the country. And the people who follow all of the MAG events will tell you that MAGWest is a different vibe than what happens here. Not better or worse, but the people bring their energy into the space, and therefore the energy within the space is different inherently. Even if it's more positive than what we see online, maybe that's not the yardstick that we should use, to measure the quality of a physical space that we might make. So for you, sir, the thing that I think is the most interesting is that the gaming world that you are so well steeped in precedes this digital world. Even the Atari, we were playing RPGs and card games for decades and centuries, if you really want to get into it. And now what's happening is that a lot of the games that existed on paper, like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and stuff like that, and card games that you actually held in your hand, now have virtual world and digital world gaming where people are playing and not physically in the same space. People are playing online. There is an evolution and a direction of what used to be everyone sitting around a table for a dungeon module, and you stayed there until either everybody quit or everyone died or you got tired and the pizza ran out or whatever. So do you think that this world that you're well steeped in, going digital, coming into the space that is fraught with all the issues that we talked about, is going to bring its own energy and maybe not run into some of these potholes that we see in the video gaming space, or is it going to have the same challenges and threats and struggles that the video gaming world has?
We're still going to see a lot of threats. We're still going to see a lot of missteps, so to speak, because in the real world, when you're playing games, you have a human opponent, or you have a co-player with you right there. Whatever game it is, whether you are playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, if you are playing Smash Up or Catan or anything like that, you have a table there. But the virtual world does not translate the same type of energy because it doesn't feel as personal. The only personality you see or you hear is a voice, a name, and then you have, okay, I have an opponent, their name is this and da-da-da, and we see it now. A lot of people feel a little bit more enabled, and even to the point where they're just flat out nasty because they feel a sense of freedom that they can say and do whatever they want. Whereas in a live space, in an actual space, in a gaming store like I work at, your opponent's right there. So there's a sense of community, there's energy, there's a vibe. Even if you've never met anyone here before, you still feel that. Like here at MAGFest, I went over to the Riverview Ballroom. Board games everywhere. I guarantee you 90% of the people there have never met each other, but as soon as you sit down at the table and say, hey, can I play with you? They're going to say yes, you're going to sit down, you never met these people before, and next thing you know, you're going to make friends. So the translation to the virtual world is harder because there's not as much of a human connection. And to me, that's the one thing that makes it so pure, makes it so beautiful.
Well, see, what I wonder about that, to piggyback off of your answer, is that for a community that is used to that structure of, okay, I'm used to sitting across from someone and playing a game, and now I'm going into a virtual space where I'm not sitting across from people. Are they bringing a more, what should I say, structured or stable community set of norms with them to the gameplay that wasn't necessarily in place with the video gaming community, which started and is currently in the virtual?
No. And the reason why I say that is because, like for instance, now I don't know how many people here, how many of you play Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, so we got a good chunk.
So not many.
So
you can't see everyone behind you.
So when you play, do you prefer, and this is open to anyone, do you have a preference of playing in person at a table with people, or do you prefer playing on Discord or Roll20?
I exclusively play in person. I'm not even touching digital. I'm not going with it. I'm not going with the plan of, oh, here's this time zone issue. I'm not even going to try to wire up my entire house because I've worked in sound. I've done streaming. I'm not going to fight with having this person like, oh, is your Wi-Fi cut now? I'm sorry, play that again because now I'm burning the time of the people around me just to make that fit. Because I've also worked in a game store, and so I've got customers trying to ask me, like, yo, dude, can I play with you sometime? Because I've actually built that space with people. But I can't provide that space to everybody from only one person.
Correct.
So it's like even this connection of video game versus like physical, I always prefer physical because even if I can't play with everybody, I can be a part of more people's lives. Meanwhile, if I go online, we're talking about like what that space normally is. If you just want to put the pin in what the issue is in everyone's mind, let's talk about a League of Legends server.
We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
Let's not talk about. We don't talk.
Sir, we don't have that kind of time, sir.
Okay. We don't talk about Bruno here.
Yes. I was going to say, like, arguing, like, on the topic of League of Legends, that that toxicity originates from the original game of Dota back in Warcraft 3. That was awful to get into because the actual game had horrible mechanics. They had a secret shop, which legit, if you did not know what it was, you were basically out of the club and you could not find certain items. And then there was other secret mechanics, broken game heroes. If you picked the wrong hero right off the bat, you were out of the game. There were some heroes that are just horribly bad.
It was crazy.
Nightmare of game. That's where some of the toxicity comes from. Is just the entire game itself originally was an exclusive club. You were in it or you weren't.
So you're saying that that the structure of the game, like it was already toxic to begin with, and then you superimpose distance and anonymity where people can really get nasty, and then it just ate itself alive. I got you.
If you tried to get into the game, but you didn't have the game pre-downloaded, they would instant kick you, preventing you from trying to use that one.
I've seen that before. Yes, ma'am.
I was just saying, what was I going to say? So I played in both formats, in-person, digital. Me personally, I prefer the in-person, but I do see perks because right now I'm in a campaign that's been lasting for about a year now, virtual. I love it because 30% of us are in Chicago, 30% of us are in Atlanta, and the last bit is in Maryland. And I like sometimes to work from a cultural perspective. I like to sometimes play D&D with folks that were less and have a different interpretation of the characters. That's super helpful for me because in that group, they're really open to newbies, and I'm really big about recruiting new folks, especially people who are kind of apprehensive about like that judgment that comes unfortunately with it. Hey, can we come in? And because there are some cutthroat spaces.
Oh, yeah.
But on top of that, for a person who is probably not from the community that does D&D, even before all the movies and stuff came out, for some folks, this is a great way to kind of sneak in before they come to a con and be like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me. But that's my perspective.
Okay.
So you're using this virtual platform for the purpose, basically running contrary to the state of the virtual platform, which is this toxic place that has all this negative potential. But you've managed to find a way to make it a positive space, at least within a limited group. So I want to follow up on that question. Do you think that is a formula that could be replicated on a wider scale? Like, how far out can you spread the ice before it cracks and everybody drowns? Like, you obviously have had a formula that works. You've got some of the challenges that were said here about region and time zones, you've obviously overcome. Technology and communication and Wi-Fi is getting better every 6 minutes. So, eventually, some of the connectivity issues are going to eliminate themselves. But the anonymity is still there. The people are not connected in any way. They're not even, according to you, necessarily part of the fandom before they show up. So they really don't have any investment coming in to holding any particular norms or being admitted to any community that they've already assigned value to because they're part of it already. But you've managed to find this place that is welcoming and bringing all these folks in and adding to the fandom and the community. Is that, so do you, in your heart, maybe not, you maybe haven't mapped this out in your head, do you think that's something that could be scaled, or the formula could be scaled where there would be hope for a virtual platform for these games?
Adults playing. Folks have work schedules, blah, 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 blah. But I think it can be, like, for example, our campaign is 8 people did. I think it can be spread out a little bit more, but again, numbers come with complications, especially according to time. But I think it's possible, and I'm also thinking, I always think with an intersectional lens. If it's not our cultural background, it's our ability. How can we travel, or how can we sit for long periods of time? And for some folks, it's helpful, especially when you can modify your screen or modify your ability to sit for long periods of time. I really think there's potential there that really helps people beyond just the typical sitting at the table. Because there's some folks who would love to, but the patience and the openness sometimes is not present in traditional spaces.
I've got nods down here, so you may not see it, but you've resonated a point. Go for it.
Yes.
So for me, it's either or. Like, I'm doing an online campaign right now, and it's 6 months running. And we have a variety of people. We have some people from Malaysia playing with us, and some people from the other side of the U.S., and some people in the UK that are playing with us too. which is great. But the downside of it is that because it's online and you're not having a physical presence, people will start talking on top of each other. And if you have issues where too much stimulus from everyone and then you just check out, then it becomes a problem. Whereas in the physical space, you can basically raise your hand and, put in a few words. And I do like that in physical space with other people, especially with friends. But for me, the downside of that, because I like playing D&D, I love it. But having bad experiences in the public space, dealing with issues of sexual harassment or things that would create D&D horror stories, have kind of dissuaded me from playing in the physical space and moving strictly to online.
Gotcha. So that the key thing is the human touch is what's missing.
Yeah,
it's the human touch.
There's a lot of empathy missing from even in the physical space. That if you don't have that human element of empathy to connect with other people, then it makes it hard, even in the physical sense, to connect with other people. So you don't react in certain ways with strangers. For instance, if you're telling a racist joke to a bunch of strangers, of course the strangers are going to react a certain way, and you thinking, well, I just said a joke, why are people getting upset? Even though you said something that was objectively horrible.
Very questionable.
So I want to take this to the next level, and this idea of the gamification of almost everything. As we discuss Web3, we're talking about education, we're talking about job training, we're talking about our workspaces. I mean, we're doing everything in this virtual online world, and as technology, both the hardware and software, develops, there are more and more virtual spaces emerging that people are being social in. And I've actually managed to find a few that were pretty normal and tame, even though people were made of, one person's a robot and another person is a battle-clad giraffe, but we're walking around in this lounge having decent conversations and meeting each other. There was a special on HBO Max, about this group of people who had met and gotten married. And, they just all met during the pandemic, being in these online virtual spaces, and have found an oasis to kind of have that community and that connection. And what I wonder is, as we find more and more virtualization of everything that we do in the physical world, are we able to take the gamification of, say, relationships, the gamification of conventions, like almost every other convention, I don't even know if MAG does it, but there is a virtual component to this. Like, they're doing this hybrid con that you'll have a convention that has 10,000 people and has run a hard 10,000 for 5 years, no growth, no shrinkage, right? And then they'll do 2 years during COVID of virtualization, building their numbers up to like 20, 25,000. Thank you. And then when they come back after the pandemic is over and the first virtual is ended and you're going into the physical space, now there's 25,000 people at a con that the last time they met was 10,000, but the connection happened over the virtual space. So there's a relationship there that is valuable, obviously, it's sustainable, it's profitable. So there's got to be some kind of a formula that could be applied when we start looking at, oh, am I going to start doing more conventions now that I've got an Oculus and, they're putting the 360 cameras and running through the con and mapping it out, and I could go around and bump into people? Are we going to have a hybrid situation where, someone brings back the Google glasses where, there's only 35 people in here, but if I put my Google glasses on, there's 600.
I will walk out of here now.
You can't walk away from Google, sir. That's the point. You're going to be the guy talking about these people don't exist. But you know what I mean? So you guys understand where technology is headed. And the question I have is is society keeping pace with technology?
So I think a very easy pitfall to fall into here is to operate under the assumption that these spaces are mutually exclusive. Whereas it is much more beneficial to both, I think, for one to feed into the other and vice versa. I think the thing that digital spaces really provide, regardless of genre, regardless of subject matter, are inclusivity and accessibility. Those are the two benefits that, I mean, we can have a coexist in New York, and we can have a MAGFest in Washington. We can have these big hubs of people where everybody gathers physically, but there are people who don't have the financial means, the physical means, whatever justification it may be, to access those spaces that can then be exposed to that sort of environment, to that sort of culture via a digital interface, and either discover a passion for it and decide they want to pursue a physical space, or encounter people who might be able to help them along that path. And then, of course, people meet in the physical spaces, and they branch out to the various parts of the world and decide, oh, I have to go home. But because that digital entity exists, they now have the ability to reconnect, to stay connected, to continue pursuing these passions in different avenues, and then reconnect again next year. I think seeing these as two halves of the same whole and taking a holistic approach to the way these communities are built and driven is the critical next step to making sure this is a societal thing that advances in the future.
I love the way that was worded. Thank you for that, because, you know, as a con runner, I always get asked about virtualization. You know, are you going to have a hybrid component? Because I live in Seattle, Washington, and, you know, it's $800 just to get to the airport from where I am, or whatever it is. It's so cost prohibitive. And we've you know, struggled with the idea of doing it, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And your articulation of it is kind of where I come from, that as long as there is a physical space with a physical community that kind of, I don't want to say kind of, you know, rebuts everybody from getting out of line or creates a framework that kind of guides everyone's behavior on the digital side. But that's kind of what it is that there is a physical MAGFest, right? And there is a MAGFest community. And so if they did a virtual aspect to this and made a hybrid convention, and you had another 10,000 people that were, you know, plugging in through a live stream or whatever, they would be somewhat constrained in, you know, the norms of behavior that are set by the people who are in the room. Because obviously, eventually, if, like you said, they do find this to be a space that they would like to venture into physically, then they want to be welcome in that space. So we have to govern our behavior and govern our interactions so that if we do get that opportunity, you know, we want to make sure that that's something that we could do. So I'm going to go over here with my friend Javon. And we talk about this gamification piece. So what are, and I mentioned Google, but what are all of these game development companies, what are all of these software companies, you know, that are doing all of this virtual work doing to create circumstances where we are having this as more of two halves of a whole, as opposed to what I hear some people in the world saying, well, everything's going to be virtual, and everything's going to be crypto, and everything is going to be, you know, blockchain, and everything else is extinct, so just jump over here now and forget that world exists. And I'm kind of like, woo, woo, woo. You know, who is pumping the brakes and thinking of it in this more holistic, you know, spectrum that maybe we don't know about and your research might have come across? And that difficult look says not many.
My phone.
The jowls are saying there's not much hope.
So to address your question very plainly, I'm unaware who's taking this particular holistic approach, right? I'm aware of the, how can I say this nicely? I'm aware of the organizations that we treat as people in America, like your Facebooks and your Googles. Am I saying too much? Your Facebooks
we'll
and
know
your
if our lights and internet go out.
whom have attempted in many ways to either augment physical spaces, right? Or try to take what is physical and make it virtual, and it failed miserably, right? And there's several things that go with that, right? One of the things I think about is a sense of who is this for, right? Kind of question, right? For example, PlayStation, right? And I'm a proud PlayStation owner. I'm putting it out there, right? But PlayStation has a PSVR. Actually, PSVR 2 should be out sometime this year, right? PSVR, I believe, is worth more than the actual PS5 itself. Like it's more expensive to buy the headset than the system in and of itself. Who is this for, right? Second question, a sense of ethicality in the space, right? when something happens in virtual spaces, who do you go to?
Accountability.
Because right, think of it.
Accountability.
We talk about, you brought up League. It's a great example. Not to harp on League, but let's harp on League, right? Riot has always struggled for a very long time of thinking through what it means to but to really put boundaries, right? Ramifications, right? Some kind of quote unquote pseudo judiciary system to make sure that its community members are respecting one another, right? Bottom line, right? To make sure that people feel welcome in the space, right? But what turns me off into a space, which is a true story, when I played my first game of League, circa 2011, right? My first game of League, right? I booted it up, and I tried to play it. No, actually 2014. I booted it up, tried to play it, right? And the first thing I see is, I think we got a N-word ... in the space. That's like the first line I saw. And I was just like, saddle up. Right? So why would I, and this is not exclusive to just me being a black identified male, but why would I, a person that holds maybe certain identities, right, outside of the dominant structure of whatever territory that you're in, right, why would I put myself in a now virtual space, right, where now people can hear my voice, right, depending on the system, people can at least try to infer gender, try to infer race, cultural background, to find ways to then subjugate me, right? And for a lot of us, it could be a form of escapism into those spaces, but if I can't even escape in the virtual world, let alone the physical space, then where do I go? I'm trying to keep this as PG. Right. Where in the Barnes and Nobles do I go? You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying it cannot be done, but I am saying that us as people have a lot of things that we need to allot for in our own physical realm, right? That if we do not address what we can do to each other in physical spaces, whatever we do, we will find ways to translate that into virtual spaces. I'm not saying there is not a sense of digital utopia out there in some future. That's not my job to say, right? What I am saying is that us as people need to be responsible for us as people, right? Therefore, if you are not one of those people who are ready to necessarily speak on someone else's behalf if something goes down, right? Something terrible happens. This is not a moral question. This is not a moral judgment. But if you're not one of those people ready to do that, know that that will be there waiting for you in virtual and augmented spaces. Is that a fair statement to say?
I agree.
Once this video comes out, it could be a different story for me.
We all losing our job, right? Our credit scores all drop.
Who's this Javon person? We need to talk to him. Who's this Javon?
I really do like this idea that we recognize that if we don't find solutions to the problems that we face in the physical world, those solutions are what are going to be needed to make any virtual iteration work. Be it gaming, banking, workspace, all of this is being altered by the virtualization of our world. But if, like you said, other than the game space, like if you're online work and somebody starts harassing you, you have an HR structure within that virtual space that you can report to, and there is a consequence that can be had for saying the wrong thing, typing the wrong thing, or being caught with your stuff out during a meeting. Jeffrey Toobin had a like, why do you're on television, sir? Why? What is going on? I love his analysis, but damn. Anyway, that was a segue. Sorry, but my point is that gives me hope. Because there's a task that we can at least map out to apply to some of these spaces that don't have those structures and make an agreement within ourselves before we go into a space. I mean, think about Metaverse. Metaverse, oh my God, it's coming out. And now we're all like, I've had people say, you got to do this in the Metaverse. And I'm just like, I'm thinking of the Metaverse kind of in the same way. Who was it said this? Was it you? We were talking about a new condo being built in Southeast DC. It's great in theory. You know, there's never a bad reason to put up a condo somewhere. Someone needs a place to live. But right there, and is that what we want to do? Who's it for? All of those questions come in. Yes, sir.
You put the idea of like the online spaces. Even for the games that I play, I'm a huge 40K main, huge Warhammer player. And so I guess the one thing I normally find, like even for like that kind of attitude of like someone's gonna get bit, who's it gonna be? The main issue I always find turns out to be sportsmanship.
Yes.
Because like even for Magic, we want to talk about how Wizards of the Coast has been doing recently. I've had people sell their entire Magic decks because they're tired of losing the cards with a triple-digit price point. And they're like, you know what, I'm going to proxy this for 50 cents and then come back and beat you with it. But it just doesn't turn out that way because now the game has gone out the door for something else. Or even if we're talking about like other games that are on tabletop. Even like D&D doesn't really have that competitive nature built into it, but people get competitive.
They do.
Because even as a dungeon master, part of the laws of playing the game is that everybody wants to do the cool thing. Let them do the cool thing. But it doesn't always end up being that way. So even for any digital spaces,
A la Leroy Jenkins type of,
Yes.
But even for the coexist space, they have all these arcades that are set up, but all those arcades are always going to be two-player to some degree. And so you have that mutual agreement when you sit down, I'm here to play you, you're here to play me, let's push some buttons, let's get it down. Or even when I'm at a 40K team, when I'm at a local game store, I'm like, I know all of my players. But if a new kid rolls up, this kid rolls up with a shoebox, puts a ketchup bottle on it that he's duct taped together, and said, that's my tank. I'm like, cool, put it on the table. But I also know other people who are going to be more on the line of, I don't think so. So there's always going to be that kind of barrier no matter what game you're getting into, what game you're playing is, what are we here to do? Are we here to play or are we here to win? If you're here to win, you can get nasty. If you're like to play and to actually, play a game, then you can actually get back to the spirit of what it was supposed to be and probably actually get back to like the roots of what it was intended for in the first place.
We get to him.
Oh, yes, sir.
Have you heard of the absurdist anti-capitalist horror game, or horror baseball simulation game, Blaseball?
No.
I've heard of Blaseball.
It sounds like an Apatow movie, but
I saw it played at PAX Unplugged.
Incredible in that it has a 30,000 person Discord that is incredibly nice. It's also like one of the queerest spaces online I've ever been. And the thing that makes it different is that it has very strong moderation. The game was a surprise COVID hit, and then they eventually got some money. The first thing they did was put some of their moderators on the table. So they're serious about this. I highly recommend checking it out. It actually returns on Monday after a year and a half of like proper development. It was just a surprise hit. It's a space where within the first 2 months of the game existence, people made like a couple of musical albums, like a whole rock opera based on the game. It's a baseball simulation, but like players can die. And
sounds like Blood Bowl.
Like 24 different teams, and that's one of the things I think makes this space work, is that it's divided into 24 different teams, and each team has a different culture. Some teams are very small, so you can get a smaller space, and there's more tighter community, or you can have a big team, like the Hades Tigers, or the Los Angeles Unlimited Tacos, versus the Baltimore Crabs.
Gotcha.
Nice.
I highly recommend, if you're looking for an effective online space, look up Blaseball.
And I think that's going to be the search. I think there's going to be a next step that comes along where a template is perfected and then applied universally to whatever degree you can in gaming spaces, workspaces, learning spaces, or any of these virtual spaces that are emerging. And I have been to conferences and conventions that center around Web3, center around crypto, center around esports. And the thing that they are all tend to be missing is this cultural discussion that we're having. And it's kind of alarming that it's all about the game and it's all about getting as many people playing it as possible, getting as much virtualization as possible and all this sort of thing. And it's like, well, you could put a whole bunch of people in front of screens and have them play a game, but the culture and the pageantry and the community that should be built organically around whatever it is you build is not going to just show up because you put a bunch of PCs together and face each other off at, the Daytona Convention Center, right? And I think there's a lot of folks who have a lot of money, at these, business improvement districts that you see in all these big cities, that they all want to get in on the esports dollar train, don't know what it is, have no clue, and they come to me because I'm the only person wearing, cyberpunk gear at this conference where everyone's buttoned up with khakis, and they're like, that guy must know what he's talking about. I was like, I only know enough to scold you, and that's why I'm here, and here's my pitch deck, and I will show you what I can do for you. And this idea that, this community doesn't exist, and that there aren't these threats, and there aren't these concerns, and there aren't these, actual people who could be hurt if this is done wrong. And I don't think that we're in a place where we can say the technology is going to stop. It's going to keep developing at the pace, if not faster than what it's doing now. And I think it's on us, and I think when I mean literally us, like people in this room who care about these issues, to make these decisions and hold the companies accountable, the developers accountable, so that when these spaces emerge, and I think that's what's going to happen, they're just going to kind of dump on us like waves on the beach. Hey, here's a new virtual space. Hey, here's a new virtual space. What proactive ways are we going to take so that we know how people are going to be treated and how people are going to be able to be introduced? How are we going to make equity issues, just like you were talking about? Oculus ain't cheap. PS5 ain't cheap. There's no way to go virtual unless you have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of Wi-Fi and a certain amount of access. How do we open that lens wide enough and then make it a beneficial enough space so that it's worth going into, and then it's a plus for humanity, right? Mm-hmm. I think it starts with the thought leaders in rooms like this. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I wanted to, using the word community and all, because it was defined. It's very easy to talk about what the community should look like, but every community is not going to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Every community has a particular need that the people, that has to be met.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When we talk about building community, we need to talk about what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a tabletop player. I'm more playing on console, but the way I play, let's say Fallout, is very different. And the way I engage people in Fallout is very different from the way I play and engage with people in Catalog, that I play with Mass Effect, that I play with Star Wars, the Dragon, like anything. Like those games have their own stories. Cultures are built from that. So the community is going to look like that. So that we have to define what that word means and how it relates to the culture of the game.
Are we talking about digital code switching? Like, did we just broach that here?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I love that.
Thank you.
I never thought about that idea that we are different people, and that is a good point. In certain games, we act differently. Mm-hmm. Like I'm playing, like, what name a card game where you might, be a jerk?
Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh, for sure.
Right, but then in another game,
You see my face, so yeah, I've still got battle scars, y'all. I'm getting disability from Konami for that. I'm just saying.
So to her question, I mean, especially since you're someone who works directly with a constituency that are coming to purchase, play, and develop in these game spaces, because you work and live and breathe in the space, are you seeing a different definition of community from game to game, from medium to medium? And do you have to approach the way you sell and the way you moderate and the way you broker, tournaments and stuff like that based on that?
Yeah, there's always been a difference. And for instance, with Konami coming out with Master Duel, they did Duel Links, and you would see a massive online community, but you would also see an elitist mindset based on how much money you're willing to spend what's at your disposal to build the top deck and continue to play and everything. But you put them in a real life situation, it's totally different because they don't have the protection of a screen. You're looking right at your opponent, and you could just tell that there's going to be that palpable anger right then and there. So how you conduct yourself in the virtual space is going to be different than in the real world, because it's a different scenario, it's a different situation, regardless of what game you play. You know, you mentioned Warhammer 40K. That community in itself are passionate, but they do not play around, and unless you are in a particular space where the community, and I'm using the word community, well, they've built themselves locally, that they welcome new members and new players, they're going to have an elitist mindset. There's going to be an elitist mindset. There's going to be that judgment. There's going to be that, who are you? How much money did you spend on your army? Your paint job is trash. Okay, we're going to play you. We're going to hand it out to you. You did a good job. Sportsmanship, blah, blah, blah. We don't want him ever here again. Unfortunately, that's going to play out. So yes, there is that code switching. And if you can address that code switching to be able to translate from real world to the digital, to virtual, you may be able to find the problem that can be answered across the board. That's just for me. See, I've always been real world. I've always been tabletop in front of me because I like talking and interacting. The interaction is the key. Because you can't, I'm sorry, I've seen people, first-person shooters, they get on here, yeah, they talk all that yang and stuff, but I bet you if you were meet in person, they would be the most awkward conversation in the world.
It's like somebody you have an altercation with on the road in your car, and then you end up like, oh crap, we're all going to home. And then once you get out of the car, like all the anger is still in the driver's seat, and you're kind of like, it was whatever. I drive Christine. It's that's a ghost car with its own evil. Don't mind me. But like when you're in the car, you're like, I'm going to kill your kids. Like, why would you? 3 lanes, especially here in the Maryland area.
But going back to what she said, community is specific. Once it's defined, then you know what you're working towards. When you have an idea of what the grouping is, who are going to be a part of it, how much inclusivity is going to be there, how much inclusion is there, then you can create that community because you have a foundation, you have a benchmark. That is where a lot of these virtual games and virtual communities are missing, because they don't have a benchmark. All they're focused on is, oh, okay, pay this amount of money. No, you're fine. It's like, pay.
On the idea of foundation and so forth, you actually trust companies who are actually building trustworthy foundation, because you're talking about communities and stuff, and talking about Master Duel, the goal of the community and base game itself is to make money. So there are predatory practices.
Exactly.
To trick people into developing addiction. I play gacha games, so I know all about addiction of just loot boxes and everything. It's very predatory, and can you even have a community from those corporations? Because they are out there to make money. They are out there to prey on certain people, especially with certain games.
Well, I think that's a question that kind of has that parallel in the virtual world versus the real world. These same corporations have physical spaces, right? And so you would think about, all right, what about Maytag? They make washer dryers. They have no interest in making washer dryers that will never break, right? So we know that, they got what's the lifespan of your average washer dryer versus how much you spend, blah, 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 blah. How accountable do we hold Maytag to make a valuable product that it doesn't cost as much to fix, in the first year as it cost to buy it in the previous year? We have that balance as a customer base, i.e. community, right? There's chat boards and, video tutorials that are all about Maytag and fix it yourself and how you do this and best ways to set it up, blah, blah, blah. So I'm thinking that if we are able to evolve our mindset to not see, these giant monolithic tech companies as inaccessible and unresponsive to us, then maybe we'd be more willing to take the action that affects their bottom line if they don't behave in good conscience. Now, obviously, there's always going to be bad actors in corporations. We were, if we're going to talk about Web3 without talking about FTX, that's a prime example, right? The way I see my enthusiasm for Web3 is about not the car crashes and the stagecoach robberies happening on the train tracks on the road, but the fact that there's a train track and there's a road, right? And that at some point there will be enough law that we will be able to use these train tracks and roads to do amazing things. The people who are on it now doing stupid stuff is kind of the Wild West that we went through, and so, yeah.
Trying to talk about FTX and cryptocurrency, because if you look at what they've gone through, historically, they're pretty much going through, banking, U.S. banking history. We have bank runs, and who's guarding the wallets and so forth.
Exactly.
I want coach.
It's a stagecoach, man. If you got your gold bullion in a case on the stagecoach, they're gonna come with the ocelot. And they're gonna hands up. Like, all right. This guy gets me.
Put you back on your buckboard so you can get back to the farm. How about that?
So I want to close with Javon. Here's my question. You're in the education space. You teach. This guy is at University of Maryland. We've actually seen the tamest version of him that I've ever seen behind a microphone here, and thank you for that, for not scaring the kids. But you are very well steeped, I would imagine, in this rapid virtualization of the education space. And, in all the ways that we're talking about gaming and the gamification of every, facet of physical and human space, we saw in the 2 years of COVID this acceleration of, people being able to use Zoom meetings and learning spaces, turning in homework and taking tests and all of this from their pajamas in their bedroom in a world where that was not even really considered viable education. And now you've got this online world that still is remaining even though the schools are opening. Do you see any parallels or any lessons in what you might see in the University of Maryland school system and how they're doing virtualization and policing bad behavior and creating valuable experience that does have value in the real world to what we're talking about in building safe spaces in game spaces, financial spaces, and other ways that would parallel what you've seen?
Well, quick disclaimer.
You're not used to work policing when it comes to school spaces?
We will try to control our and moderate our language on that in the future. Yes, we'll go ahead.
So first, I'm at Johns Hopkins. I work there, but what I say is no reflection to the Johns Hopkins University.
Disclaimer.
Because I saw that episode of Housewives of it. That was the whole thing.
That was the whole thing. Yes.
Quick disclosure.
Boy, we're prohibited. All right.
Right. And I know that we're got to wrap up in 2 minutes, so I will try to put this as brisk as possible. COVID, what it did a lot, right? What COVID also showed was the inequities and exacerbated pre-existing problems. Did that incredibly well. It showed not just, we all knew that we had a crack in the educational system across America, but COVID showed just how big the problem was, and we all had to actually deal with it head on. Because finally, everyone had to address the exact same issue at the exact same time, which has never happened for quite some time, right? Right, so when inflation happens, right, some people are affected by inflation more than others. Some don't give a shit, right? Oh, I cursed on here, but right, some don't care.
It's MAG, you can
right? But COVID affected everyone. So when it comes to education, in particularly transitioning from physical to online education, right? Though Zoom online classes are here to stay, if not more, and burgeoning, right? What it showed is that some of our children, some of our households, right, especially in rural and poor communities, most of them Black and Hispanic, right? They're the ones that are mostly affected. right? What we also saw was people stepping up to the plate, like the ingenuity, right? Turning buses into basically busable lunches for folks, turning buses into Wi-Fi hotspots for children, right? Internet companies actually say, you know what? We can provide like free Wi-Fi. And it's like, really? That's not new, but thank you, I guess, right? Right? So what I'm saying is, to put it short, I believe that there can be a world in which certain inequities, infrastructural problems can be addressed, right? If people, the right people, are willing to let go of their egos, right, and actually do the work that is necessary. And sometimes doing the work that is necessary does not translate into what is profitable. Does that make sense?
It does. And that is our time.
And that is our time.
And you know what? I want to thank all of you guys for a very robust discussion. I learned something.
Thank you, guys.
My panel, I learned from them. I love having these kind of discussions where I come out knowing more than when I went in, and that is because of you. It is because of you. I'm giving you all a round of applause. Give yourselves a round of applause, and enjoy the rest of your MAGFest. Thank you so much for coming out.
Everybody.
We had a great time. Looking forward to enjoying the rest of the weekend with you.
Especially from the Warhammer player. Yeah!